Kevin, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about having this conversation today. I think this is a topic that is really germane to multifamily, very applicable to multifamily. And I, having been an operator for 30 years, I'm deeply interested in it. So let's maybe frame up our conversation today, maybe call it a problem in the industry. Data shows that 55% of renters actually carry renter's insurance, even though most properties, if not all, require it. So why is that gap so persistent?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons for that. And, we've been around as a company for almost 10 years trying to figure that out and how we can help. Um, but a couple reasons are, people traditionally, the story is like, hey, you get through a leasing process or an application process, get to a lease signing, and they say, hey, I'll hand you the keys if you hand me the renter's insurance policy or something thereof. And, maybe it's done via email or whatever. And that's the traditional experience. And then the key question is what happens 1 minute or 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week after that?
Yeah.
I think the generous version of it is people forget to, you sometimes forget to pay, you do 6 months renter's insurance policy, you sometimes forget to pay the bill, the policy lapses. There's a version of it that's I don't like to think about where people intentionally cancel stuff, but so it does happen. You don't want to pay the bill or that sort of thing. And so at the end of the day, this just accumulates to a big risk for everyone. The management company is responsible for making sure that these units are occupied in accordance with the lease. The lease says almost always, as you said, there's a renter's insurance requirement or a liability coverage requirement of some kind. The renter's liable for that requirement, whether they have it or not. And then obviously the owner of the asset has a vested interest in not having uninsured incidents that they have to be responsible for. So it's no good for anyone if this doesn't happen, but that's how that usually goes is we check it at the time of the application or the lease. And then what happens after that? Usually no one's paying attention. And that's one of the things that we do here at Foxen.
I want to key out something you just said there. And let's just frame it as risk.
Yeah.
There's a real risk when a policy lapses. Can you sort of unpack that for us? Because sometimes operators, potentially maybe at the property level, they don't understand. No indictment there, but they don't understand what they're risking.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and there's a good reason for that. I mean, trying to do quite a bit in a compact timeline here, and so and everyone can't be an expert on everything. But one of the provisions of the lease is usually appropriately so is usually, hey, if you're going to live inside this unit that you don't own, and you're going to have some responsibility for the potential damage that could occur. So typically, we see that's in a lease. It'll say, hey, you're required to maintain either liability coverage or renter's insurance of, let's say, up to $100,000. And so they pick a number. Some cases it could be 200 or 300 in certain high cost states or locales. But that's just intended to protect everyone against an incident. What kind of incident are we referring to? It could be small. You could trip and your elbow hits the wall and you just crushed in some drywall. Or it could be I left a pizza in the oven and I fell asleep and started a fire and there was substantial fire damage. Or it could be I left the water running and there was water that overflowed and that sort of thing. So in that case, generally what you want to have is, this is why insurance exists, for those types of issues.
That's
and
right.
so typically there's a property or a general liability policy or a property insurance of some kind for the asset. But those typically carry high premiums and high deductibles, necessarily so. These are expensive, buildings and assets. So the deductible might be, $100,000. And so if you're going to have an incident like that, your first goal is not necessarily to run and tap your property insurance. You have to pay $100,000 deductible, and it might not even be that much, right?
Right.
So then you're typically asking yourself first, okay, what coverage does the renter have in accordance with the lease? And that's when the answer to that question is nothing, that's a problem. And so what you want to do is avoid that situation from happening, so that, in that case where one of those incidents that I just mentioned occurred, we don't have the management company that's, having a tough conversation with the resident who's having a tough conversation with the owner, and everyone's got a problem that we now need to solve. This is why it exists. So let's make sure that issue doesn't happen, is what we're trying to do.
Definitely. So 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 to stick with the theme of risk, you have an ownership group uh, that has this sort of illusion of compliance. So you
Yeah,
let in by saying, "Hey, all people are required to have this. A certain percentage of them may or may not have it." And so you have a lot of operators look at like 90 to 95%. And I remember this myself. I would look at reports and I go, "Oh, we're,
yeah,
we're pretty good," you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Um, But why is that false sense of security? Why is it that it's there?
Well, I think sometimes there's a couple reasons, but sometimes maybe one of them would be it's a little bit of a misnomer. So sometimes there might be an arrangement. Either what happens is you do the key exchange, like I mentioned. Like I think it's helpful to think about it physically. You hand me
Yeah,
the
yeah,
certificate of insurance, I hand you the key. Okay, great. I feel good about that. Now I check that box in my compliance report wherever that lives, and I think this person's got a 12-month lease. I'm like, we're good to go. So that's not necessarily correct. Hopefully it is, but it's not
right.
necessarily correct. Then the other version of it is you might conflate two different things. So, oftentimes there's a within maybe a property management system you use, you can offer residents as part of their onboarding process, say, hey, we can propose that they can offer them an opportunity to quote and bind a renter's insurance policy. A lot of property management systems either partner or have built their own solutions around that. Well, that's great if the resident opts into that, and then you
Right.
might have some percentage of residents who opt into that, and you say, okay, well, they're good too. Um, Sometimes that service, depending upon which it is, can come with the tracking to tell you on a daily and minute by minute basis, like, hey, these policies are in effect. Sometimes not, and so, but you might think to yourself, hey, I turned that on in our property management system, so I'm all good there. And so it sometimes could be in that case, it's just the question that was unasked. And in the
Mm.
former case, it was a situation where you had a sense of comfort about what happened, but then you extrapolated that that was going to continue for the 12 months of the lease, which isn't necessarily true. And again, as you said, these are not, you know, there's a lot of things going on at any given time when you're
Mm.
working in management. So it's like you only have so much attention span for all of this. And in reality, the worst case, I think, is when you see management companies who are devoting a lot of time and attention and people resources to some sort of kind of compliance program where maybe they're checking stuff every month and asking residents to prove it once a month, or maybe they got someone, a local agent, a local insurance agency they partnered with who they call them and check it or something. We see all sorts of interesting scenarios where people are devoting a lot of time and attention, human resources to this, and it's a shame because I don't think that's the highest and best use of the time relative to all the other opportunities we could have had.
Yeah, you as you're speaking through that, again, I spent a lot of time on the operations side of our industry, probably the better part of 10 years on site.
Yeah.
So everything you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. And
And
it's
yeah, it's just one of those things where until someone kind of shows you, hey, there might be a better way here, a lot of times you just go with it and you're like, we got to get it done. And that's, I mean, you can pick another example like the lease audits, right? It used to be people would get in a room with a stack of papers for a week and we'd be
right.
doing lease audits, right? And now there's all sorts of interesting technology you can apply to that. Many of the leases are digital. There's just workflows. So it's not quite that anymore. And so we're in that, and some people will call property management or even real estate technology. Like some people call it a laggard technology industry in some respects. And
Mhm.
so, I don't know. That's probably true to some degree, not quite true in others. And so this is just yet another area where I think there's ideally a better way,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is true. We've been a laggard as an industry, but I do think that as of late, let's call as of late the last 48 to 60 months plus minus, uh, we've accelerated the pace of technology adoption
I
and
agree.
potentially put ourselves in a position to leapfrog things, right?
I agree. Yeah, I'm really encouraged by the tone that I see from different companies, different I industry, I'll call them industry commentators. I mean, not dissimilar to yourself, where you're an aggregator of like the pulse of the industry in a lot of respects and what's going on, and you can kind of represent that. There's others like so when I talk to our clients or prospective clients, or I hear from others in the industry, I'm definitely I'm hearing a more tech forward, let's lean in, but also the flip side of it is, hey, like from a from a prop tech vendor standpoint is like, don't oversell,
Oh,
don't promise the world, like sell what you got and crush the implementation and do a great job, and don't add a problem to the list, right? So like that's the vendor obligation, but on the other side, I'm seeing a healthy, to your point, a healthy client interest in, hey, let's adopt the latest and greatest technologies. Let's make this easier for ourselves. There's no shortage of pressure on management fees and other issues that the industry has to respond to. There's a lot of, some of the larger players are getting larger, and everyone's trying to find their spots. So, I think technology can play a positive role, but the vendor side has to do its part and we can't be overselling. We can't be not delivering on implementations. Generally speaking, I hear people, I'd, it's great that you do this one thing. I'm really like looking for vendors that can solve more than one problem and not just I don't want to have a stack of 20 vendors that do one thing. It's just too much to manage. So those are some of the themes that I'm hearing.
yeah, definitely. I would agree. Just one last remark before we move on to the next question. There is this sort of, in light of all of that positive movement, there is this tech fatigue sort of
Yes.
undertone
Yeah.
that is real. I mean, I think I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago that had 30 plus or minus different platforms or technologies
Yeah.
that they logged into on a daily basis or weekly basis. That's a lot.
It's too many is what I think is the word, and so we've tried to take the approach of not asking for another system to log into. We try to work, where our clients already are and just other stuff like that. And one of the messages we're a growth company, we're growing. But one
Mhm.
of the messages I always try to say to our team, and I say to prospective clients too, is let's just be honest about this. Our current clients don't really care if we get a new client. You know,
That's
they
right.
they
That's right.
care. I mean, they care. They love it if us growing then we can generate more resources to invest in making a better product or offering new products or other stuff like that. That's great. That's a nice flywheel. But if you growing means your eyes off the ball and my service no longer is good, which meant there's many a growth company on the side of the road that have, with the best of intentions, have been found there, and that's where you get the tech fatigue and the over promises and that sort of stuff. I'm like, we just cannot do that, and we won't do it, and we can't do it. And there's been enough. We've all seen it enough to know that it's a thing, and you gotta. It's kind of a thing because human nature just sometimes leads you that direction. So you
So
got to
true.
fight against it every day. You got to fight against it every day. We can't do it.
Yeah, no, that's music to my ears.
Yeah,
And I think you're 100% right. Well, we can do more. Oh, we can do that. We can do
yeah,
this.
exactly.
So let's talk about where the gaps hide. Just uh,
Yeah,
most operators only enforce renters insurance and pet policy compliance at move in, and you've said this, at move in
yeah,
or lease renewal, basically once a year. What happens in the other 364 days in between?
yeah. So usually, if on the if it's so we've talked a lot about the renter insurance. I'll go there and I'll move to the pet. So
Yeah,
the other 364 days in between, that's where you're just what you're trying to do if you're in trying to ensure that there's compliance with the renter's insurance requirement in the lease for 365 days. What you got to do is have a process that catches any drop balls.
yeah,
And so the drop balls are um, someone goes upstairs, cancels the policy. Okay, who's getting notified of that? In the case of if you work with Foxen, we'll get notified of that and we'll make sure that that gets addressed. That's a cancel of the policy. Then there could be the policy lapses. So that usually there's a term that it could be a 6 month term. Okay,
yeah.
180 days later, we didn't pay the bill. That lapses. We're gonna get notified of that. And what we do, and when we get notified of these things, is we assume that this is just kind of an honest mistake, and
Mhm.
so we just communicate with everybody. We say, hey, this is not you've now lapsed. Um, Foxen's tenant liability waiver program is gonna take over, or you can submit a new compliant policy. And so we do this on behalf of our management company and owner clients with their residents. We communicate really transparently and often and open and transparent, and so that everyone knows where they stand, and then we get those issues resolved. Um, those are probably the two main versions: is the cancellation or the policy lapses. That's what happens at 364 days in between. On the pet policy and pet compliance, so one of our solutions is nowadays 60% of residents have pets. It's crazy.
It
It's
is
it's
crazy.
slightly below, but so this concept of like what's a pet friendly, now you hear all of our clients, what's a pet friendly apartment? What's a pet
Yeah.
what kind of, they're thinking about what breeds can am I able to live here? There's liability questions around insurance, and if start to worry about pets that can interact with other residents that are not their owner, and then or other pets, and just there's a whole host of things that challenges that come with it. One of them is just getting the pets in the door. And so, there's robust screening processes, obviously, for the humans, which includes income verification and all sorts of, and just other, are you a good renter, and do I want you living in here or not? And there's very limited screening of the pets, although in many cases, in some ways, they're equally important or more important in terms of what they could do to damage from a damage perspective or a risk perspective, that sort of thing. So our Pet Clear solution is a solution that's intended to help clients deal with this. So we are part of the application. We run parallel to the application process. You just declare if you have a pet, you go through a screening process. And so this is super important on the way in for people to, if they're living in pet friendly communities, if they identify what their pet is, provide the right documentation, and go through that whole process just as the humans do. You
Mhm.
mentioned what happens on the 364 days in between. Well, this is where life happens. At some point, someone who didn't have a pet, they get one. That's
Yeah.
probably They probably don't do that on the exact same day they sign the lease.
Right.
Maybe they do, but and so then that's most of our clients would have a process where they'd have to notify the management company of they're bringing on a pet, and follow the process just as you would as if at the beginning of the lease of getting that pet applied to live in the apartment, verified, and that make sure it complies with all the policies of the management team.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's it's amazing to me how many pets there are in apartments these days. 'Cause
Yeah.
having been in the industry a long time, it wasn't always like that. But
Well, I think we saw a big spike during COVID when
yes,
people just were, everyone was struggling in different ways. And, I think I'm guessing, I haven't seen the Harvard study on this, but it's like, I got to get outside. I,
uh,
I've had limited contact with my family. Like, I need a friend, and I've
basically,
always thought about getting a pet, and maybe now's the time for me, and
yeah,
and then more, more work from home flexibility, so I don't have to keep a pet crated all day or other stuff like that. So we definitely saw a spike. My guess is it's some version of what I just said. Maybe there's some other variations as well. But and then I think it's one of those things, like, it's kind of doesn't. I don't know that it goes backwards. Maybe on
yeah.
the long term it does, but short term, I think this is the new reality. When we launched our Pet Clear product, it was in response to our clients telling us this is a place we could really use some help. So,
Uh,
we do renters insurance compliance, we do rent reporting, and we do pet compliance and pet management. And that was in response to and our goal is not to develop a random hodgepodge of solutions. We want to be one of those vendors that's solving real problems, allowing our management companies and on-site teams to focus on the highest value use of their time, not some of these other things that we deal with.
mhm.
And so that's why we launched it. And then the response since we have launched it is very validating in terms of the demand and people saying, yes, I'd love to learn more, because they're just struggling with it. It's a kind of an emerging challenge. To your point, it wasn't always like this.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, look, we all love our pets, but I think to one of your implied points there, they can do a lot of damage
Yeah.
and all different
There's
kinds.
real Yeah, there's real damage and real liability that exists. So I think, there's a lot of scrutiny of what are appropriate fees and things to charge, and pet rent and deposits and all these things. And everyone, what we've seen is a lot of our clients and prospects, everyone's, first of all, they all operate in different states, and there's different
That's right.
requirements, but they also have their own strategies about how they want to do how they want to manage fees. And I think that's going to continue to change as life changes here. People are going to keep reacting and taking different approaches. But nonetheless, in the case of the pets, I mean, it's very straightforward. There is real risk, there's real damage, but people also don't want to limit themselves to 40% of the renter market.
That's right.
More and more, they're looking for, how can I make these, if my units aren't pet friendly, if I'm a third party management company and the owners don't want to do pet friendly, how do we how do we have a collaborative conversation about that? Because we're missing out on a big chunk of the market, but how do we offset the risk, right? So this is where that comes in.
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about what it takes to get 100%
Yeah,
compliant. I know just a second ago, I think you called it tenant waiver liability. I have to imagine that's part of the answer here.
yeah.
But what does it take to actually get 100%?
So I think the way that we operate is if you work with Foxen, you hire us to become your renters insurance compliance provider. Um, we're gonna work with you to add an addendum to your lease packet
Mhm.
that really in one page. We're not doing 20-page addendums that are confusing. In one page, there's a insurance requirement in your lease. Here's your options. You can go get any policy that you want. We get to State Farm, USAA, all sorts of different people. We have hundreds of carriers that we see. People have their bundles
Sure.
and their preferences, and it's all good. So you can do that, and you can submit a compliant policy, or alternatively, you can just stay enrolled in a liability waiver program that Foxen is running on behalf of your landlord and management company. And so the key there is transparent communication in the lease, and then in email communication before move-in and as a part of renewal. Transparent communication, clear communication, and then options. We got to give people options. They want
Right.
options, and everyone has different preferences. And so if you do what I just said, there's not going to be a path for someone to have um, an uninsured unit or an uninsured resident, because they're either going to be enrolled in the Foxton's liability waiver program, or they're going to have provided a policy written by a third party carrier. Like I said, we see a lot of USA, State Farm, and all the usual suspects. Um, and so that's how you do it. Now, it sounds very simple. There's a whole host of challenges that when we think about on the scale of us, and we have to work with management companies that are in different states. They maybe use different property management systems. We've got to communicate really well with all the residents at key points in time, right? Like, so in advance of move in, but after a lease has been signed, we've got to offer residents the ability to upload any certificate of insurance that they would like to for. And there's hundreds and thousands of different formats that even State Farm has 10 different formats of
Mhm.
COIs that they use. And so we've built some proprietary AI technology that analyzes those certificates of insurance to ensure that no matter what the format is, we know that we can say, "Yep, this looks good. You're all set," and we can tell our back to the compliance report that you were thinking about back in the day. We can say, "Hey, it's 100%." We know that because we
Mhm.
checked, right? Um, so we built some technology to help assist us with that. By the way, that this is the little stuff. Everyone wants to deal with insurance as little as possible, I think, is the
Yeah,
general KPI. How little of my year can I deal with insurance is like the
right.
KPI.
So
And
true.
so when they go to our website and they upload a COI as an example, we built some technology that gives them real time feedback. Says, "Hey, I don't think you quite have this liability limit correct. Why don't you go fix that right now while you're thinking about it, so that I don't email you in 2 business days and tell you that, and then you're like, wait a second, I got to log back in and I don't even know." And it's just like, so little stuff like that is like really how you get this right. Again, different states, different property management systems, getting all of this flow correctly, being able to, when a resident calls, answer the phone and deal with these questions. And we're trying to do this on, again, to allow our clients, management companies, and site teams to focus on other things. So we have to take on the whole problem. So that's a little bit of what it looks like to get to 100% compliance.
I can't help but to laugh because it's well, two things you said: the 20-page addendum that adds to the 70-page lease, and all
Yeah,
these other
exactly.
things,
Yeah.
and the COIs. I can remember just literally banging my head against the wall that some, and it seemed like the insurance company would mess up the COI more often than the people on site would.
That's right.
Even
That's
if we
right.
gave them a printed version of what it should read, it still got messed up.
And yeah, it's just some of the things you would assume. You would assume like State Farm is State Farm.
Yeah,
You wouldn't assume that there'd be 30 variations of that. And you're like, well,
right.
wait, where is this information that I'm trying to find? Is, oh, it's on page 2 in the corner, and it's just, it's just it's kind of funny. And and like in our case, we're dealing with another version of it. Just it's not the sexiest version. We still get snail mail.
Oh, yeah.
We get trays of snail mail because it's not some are digital, some people upload, but we get trays of snail mail every day that we slice them open, we scan them, and then we're again running our through our proprietary AI tech to deduce who is this? Is this a compliant policy? And where do they live? And answering all those questions. And there's no, I mean, I wish there was like a magic API where we could get this information, but apparently it doesn't exist yet. So maybe someday.
Yeah, maybe someday. I hope so, for everyone's sake.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about NOI opportunities. I know, let's say over the last 36 to 40 months, the industry has really been squeezed by rising interest rates, rising costs, all kinds of things. It seems like the perfect storm has happened in the industry that's impacted the P&L. But you have an NOI opportunity. So talk to us about how that plays out.
Yeah. So, I think the key these days with respect, well, first of all, as you said, rent, many of our clients experiencing flat to down in some cases, maybe slightly up rent. And so
That's right.
a lot of focus has been on ancillary fees. There is also a version of that that's been a focus. There's kind of a macro tailwind too on how can we get residents more value? How can we
Mm,
make fees more transparent?
that's
Um,
right.
how do we make ensure clear value for what the fees are for? And
Yeah,
then like I mentioned earlier, everyone's thinking about that differently. They might have state requirements they need to follow, or they might just be thinking of like, hey, I like to do all in pricing. I saw there was a large management company that's like, we're doing all in pricing,
that's right.
and everyone's going to figure out their own on stack here. But in our case, all of our services, so we offer renters insurance compliance, we offer rent reporting, and our pet compliance. Um, all of these services have clear value for residents. So, like in the case of rent reporting, um, we're you have the option to have us report your on-time rent payments to credit agencies, so you can establish a trade line and or potentially just have that payment history go on your credit history, which otherwise it is 100% of mortgages that happens in rental housing. We think there's no published number on this. We think it's close to 10%, whereas 80% of renters would say they'd love to have it.
All day
So,
long.
so all of these are resident paid services, and in the case of the rent reporting and renters insurance compliance, they can opt out. Again, you can go USA. You can just say no, I'm good. I don't need to. I don't want my rent reported. I'm good. So it's not a mandatory fee in that sense. And then they all have there's an opportunity for all of the management companies to earn additional revenue for distributing these products to their residents. So so that can add to the ancillary the ancillary revenue bundle, but again under the right premises where it's like these are value add services for residents. There's in many cases our management company clients are incurring costs trying to get us up and running and get us acclimated with their residents. And then residents have transparency and they're able to opt out or opt into the things that they want. So that's how I would bring together all of the forces that seem to be happening right now. That we try to stay like right at the middle of all of those forces.
And is it fair to say, and please correct me if I'm misplacing this remark here, when you have a program in place like this, in addition to your umbrella policy or the bigger policy for the community, and that kind of insurer will look at this kind of program and say, hey, your rate here is going to be potentially reduced because you have this other protection in place.
We've seen pockets of that, but it's a very logical conclusion. I haven't seen as much as I would have thought. I haven't seen it take place, and I think
Yeah.
perhaps there's just not quite the right incentives. Like I think
Yeah.
in the property insurance market, because that's what you're referring to, right? The commercial
Yes.
policies and the property insurance.
Yes.
Those are very kind of market driven pricing. And so
Fair. That's
there was a
fair.
moment in 2024, for example, where it would have been referred to as a hard market
Yeah.
within the insurance industry because the prices were going up. The loss profile of the losses that the industry was experiencing was placing pressure on premiums. And then people were trying to toy with their deductibles and maybe raise the deductible and other stuff to offset their premiums. And that was again, so there was that moment where it was like flat to down rents or maybe slightly up,
Yeah,
increase in operating costs via wages, increase in variable interest rates
that's
if
right.
you were on a variable, and then increase in property insurance. So that's a perfect storm of problems. So what I've seen, the market's softened a bit. So the rates have come down. In some cases, we're hearing like 40%
Yeah.
decreases year over year, and some good stuff, some good relief for clients. But so anyway, I think a lot of that, I think the pricing there has just yielded more of a focus on the market pricing overall, and they haven't yet really priced. Typically, although I've heard some anecdotes, priced in that hey, you're working with Foxen or other providers, another provider. There is some protection offered via these programs. So hey, we're going to give you a little bit of a discount on your premiums. I've seen it in pockets. I would have thought, like you, I would have thought we'd seen it more, but it doesn't seem to be so.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you unpacking that. I've to your point about it being logical, it seems to make logical sense to me
I
because you
know.
have this extra layer of protection, but, yeah,
I
so
think there's already enough. Like if you're working with a great broker, they're going to bring competitive offers to the table, and it's like people sharpen their pencils as best they can, and maybe they consider that slightly in the underwriting, but it doesn't seem to be a core tenant just yet. I think over the passage of time, it might be because it's real. It definitely helps from an overall
yeah,
risk management standpoint.
definitely. Makes sense to me. Let's talk about, team members on site, efficiency, resident experience. You've sort of touched on this. But if you put yourself in the seat of a property manager sitting in a chair, what does compliance look like to them without these proper tools?
Typically, what we hear is, "I have a compliance report." That would
Yes.
be if if they're paying attention at all. A lot of times it's number 6 on the list, and it's
Yeah.
not really getting attention at all, and they're like, we have our process, we check it on the way in, like the key exchange, right? Um, but that's that. Then the better version would be we have a compliance report, so it's what you mentioned, you're like, "Oh, 92, 93, it's pretty good." Um, question is whether that's report is accurate. Now that's
Right.
but
That's right.
nonetheless, they're paying attention, that's good. Um, and so which is funny when we work with clients, there is no compliance report because it's done. Sorry, it's taken care of at all times. And so they're often like, "Can you send me the updated compliance report?" And we're like, "Sure."
Uh,
I don't think it's going to be super interesting for you. It's just like download your rent roll and say 100, and just it's all good. Like so, there's some exceptions. Sometimes we roll out programs upon lease renewal and other stuff. So we might have a kind of extended implementation as units turn, but generally speaking, like that's the premise. There is no more compliance reports. There is no dedicated effort. We take care of it all, and I think that's what you have to do. I believe if you really want to give leverage to site teams and our management company clients is they're looking for ways they can do more with less and keep the humans, especially in an AI world these days, keep
mm.
the humans focused on the highest value human stuff. And I don't think renters insurance compliance or pet compliance or rent reporting, like those are not it. They're not it.
No, as exciting as that is as it relates to mitigating risk on your property, it's not exciting in terms of the administrative duty that it
No way.
presents.
Yeah. So our goal is to be something that decreases risk, takes work off the staff's plate. So, generally speaking, decrease operating costs or redirect operating costs towards the highest value things. And then, like you said, ancillary revenue opportunity as well. And that's a nice, that's a nice value prop, we think, when you put it all together.
Definitely. Well, Kevin, as we bring this to a close, one more question for you. In terms of somebody sitting in an operator seat, whatever level of the organization they're in, decision maker, evaluating options out there in the marketplace, what should they be asking? Let's say the top, whatever, 1 to 3 questions that are the most important thing or things to ask.
Yeah. I think, we touched on it a little bit. I think, if you're evaluating solutions in the prop tech space generally, because, while we've been talking a lot about the renters insurance compliance and some of these other we at our core our prop tech company our clients are in the multifamily property management space in one way or another or property ownership space, and so we think about client first. We don't think about ourselves as like an insure tech company or things like that. So I think it gets at what we were talking about earlier. If you're working with a prop tech company who's seeking to solve a problem for you, really sizing up that, will they deliver? Are they overselling me?
Mm.
When it comes to showing up to the implementation and comes to answering, a property manager's call or a resident's call, like, am I dealing with a high trust entity here? And you can piece that together in a lot of different ways. It's like, how
Sure.
long they've been in business, who are they working with? Do I know anyone who would recommend them? Especially in multifamily, it's a highly networked industry. You should
That's right.
be able to know. Um, so I would start there. Then you can get into the nitty gritty on any of the solutions. So, if in renters insurance compliance, like, is it really 100% compliance? Walk me through how we get there.
Mm.
Is there a compliance report? What does my team have to do? What is show me some case studies of like representative clients and the results that have been driven. Can I talk to any of them? That sort of stuff. On the rent reporting uh, solution, which we call Rentistry, are you reporting to all three credit agencies?
Mm.
Because that's an often skipped detail, but it really matters, right? So someone's applying for, an auto loan at a car dealership, and if it just so happens that the reporting service that car dealership or that financing agency uses is just one of the three, and you only report to another one of the three, that doesn't help them. So you want, if we're going to invest this energy in focused on reporting rent to allow people to establish trade lines and build their financial health, at the moment of truth, that needs to help, right? So like, you got to get into the
Right.
nitty gritty on some of that. um I think, and I'll pick a different example on the pet compliance thing, but it's, we see a lot of needs for people think about things differently. So, configurations, how can they plug into my, I have a specific approach to how I manage, when we post charges to the ledger, how we manage payments, that sort of stuff. Can they plug into that? Um, so I think, it starts at the high level. Like, is this a trustworthy organization? Or have they been in business for a long time? Or is this like yet another tech company that's overplaying, prop tech companies overplaying their hand a bit? So let's get there. And then you get into some of the specifics of the solutions, and just the referenceability of the client. So, um, it's kind of a general answer, but I think, in these types of batters, I think it's like the 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 simple answer is the answer, right? It's like, we often just
That's right.
the issue is we often skip the details because we're like, we just want to believe it's going to be true, but I think
Yeah.
don't skip, don't skip.
I really like the way you put that. It's many times, yeah, you are, um, dare I say, you're desperate in that you need a solution. So
That's right.
you, right?
It's like
You
you're hiring someone and you're like, boy, I needed this filled yesterday. I needed
right.
this job filled yesterday. And you're skipping a step. You're like, they really don't meet one of my important criterias, but maybe I could train them up to meet it. And I could just, if I could just do that, then I could be done with this and I could hire them and they'd be on the team and they'd be helping and we really need the help. And it's like, it's just so tough. You got to maintain that discipline because, maybe that'll work, but maybe 6 months from now, you're back where you started. And that's super frustrating. Right. So it's like, I just think maintaining that discipline and that focus on these things and just really getting it right. And then the last thing I would say is like, what I've heard as well is this, can this company solve more than one problem for me? That
Mm,
that's not always a must have, but I think it's at
sure.
least a nice to have. Um, because there's only so much time and attention on vendor contracts, and the old saying, "I want one throat to choke if something goes wrong," and that sort of stuff. I think it does help on the if you an operating company that makes five decisions like that versus a different one. I think this one's gotten simpler and faster, and this one's gotten a little bit more complicated, and that can accumulate to something useful. So
Definitely. Well, before we bring it to close, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can learn more about you, learn more about Foxen. Is there anything that we didn't touch on today that you think we need to sort of end cap with here before we give you that chance?
no, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think this the last thing I would say is some of these topics. I like to joke like we talk about renters insurance compliance or whatever is boy do I crush at cocktail parties. So some of these
Yeah.
topics are they're not super exciting to most people, But for whatever reason, we've built a company that's really focused on it. We've got an energized team around it, and it's easy to get behind it when you're solving real problems for people. So
Yeah.
I think that's, we didn't discuss it, but there's a little bit of a tone and an energy that every company has, and I think I just wanted to share, like, that's we're really excited about these solutions that we deliver to our clients, and just want to continue to do that. And so that's one of the things that makes it fun to work here every day. And we have a group of like-minded people like that. And so in terms of learning more about us, we're www.foxen.com. So we were able to get the .com as years ago, and thankful that we did. There's a lot of those are running in short supply these days.
Sure.
And in terms of me, I'm on LinkedIn. So it's Kevin Jacobson. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd like to. There's so much. There's so many people posting on LinkedIn about multifamily in particular and different technologies, and I know I learn a lot. I like to post a little bit too. I'll keep you updated about what we've got going on. So we'd love to connect with anyone.
Excellent. Well, we will put all those links in the show notes so that people can click on them, and they can definitely get out there to learn more about you. Uh, Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out and investing it with me this afternoon. And for everybody who is watching, we'll see you again next time.
Likewise. Thanks for doing what you do, Mike.
Thank you.